بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد. So we spoke about the preservation of the family unit and protection of the vulnerable members in the family. The fifth benefit of the Islamic inheritance system is prevention of wealth hoarding. It prevents the accumulation of wealth within a single individual or group, promoting a balanced distribution in society. This aligns with Islamic broader principles of economic fairness and the circulation of wealth. If a person outside of the Islamic inheritance were allowed to give all of their wealth to perhaps one individual, it would cause stagnation. But by Islam and the Sharia legislating that everyone is entitled to get a portion from those who are permitted to inherit, it helps the distribution of wealth to move around the family. Number 6, it promotes responsibility and accountability. By specifying roles and shares, the system encourages individuals to fulfill their financial and moral responsibilities, such as caring for other family members. We see that a person leaves behind an inheritance, and from that inheritance, a person gets their start. How many millionaires of the world today became a millionaire because they inherited some money from a deceased grandparent and then started a business, and then it became what they became? That inheritance money sometimes is crucial to not only help to provide for one's family, but to help in other ways, which can be a springboard to the creation of other types of wealth. The last three is that number 7, the Islamic inheritance system aligns with Islamic economic principles. The system supports the broader objectives of Islamic economics by maintaining justice, reducing inequality, and ensuring the fair redistribution of wealth. And it avoids any practice which causes any exploitation. Number 8, eternal implications. Adhering to Islamic inheritance laws is seen as a sign of obedience to Allah, with the promise of an eternal reward. Deviation from these laws can lead to spiritual consequences, as mentioned in the Quran and Hadith. And last but not least, number 9, encourages planning and legacy building. The rules motivate Muslims to prepare for their passing by drafting wills and ensures their estate complies with the Sharia. This fosters a sense of responsibility and mindfulness about the temporary life of nature. It is reported that the Prophet ﷺ, he said, "Whosoever has anything that can be inherited should not let 3 nights go by except that they wrote it down." This serves as a reminder that we are not going to live in this world forever. The writing of a will, the preparation of a will, the checking on a will to make sure that it's up to date is only a reminder that what? That we are going to be leaving this world soon. And this is only a transitional period. This is only one stop until we reach our final destination. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "O Abu Hurairah, learn about the inheritance and teach it, for it is half of knowledge, but it will be forgotten. This is the first thing that will be taken away from my nation." Hadith is found in the Sunan of Ibn Majah. When it comes to the Quranic verses, there are 3 verses specifically that speak about the Islamic inheritance, and we're going to read them out directly, one by one. The first is Surah An-Nisa, chapter 4, verse 11. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Allah thus directs you as regards your children's inheritance. To the male, a portion equal to that of 2 females. If only daughters, 2 or more, their shares is 2/3 of the inheritance. If only one, her share is half. For parents, a 6th share of the inheritance, to each if the deceased left children. If no children, and the parents are the only heirs, the mother has 1/3. If the deceased left brothers or sisters, the mother has 1/6. The distribution in all cases is after the payment of the legacies and the debts. Yet know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you. Yea, know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit, These are settled portions ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-wise. I want you to pay attention to that last sentence. Ye know not whether your parents or your children are nearest to you in benefit. These are the settled portions ordained by Allah. From among the benefits that we can extract from this ayah, focusing on the last sentence, Allah is saying, you may have 4 children, and one child has been closer to you than the other 3. You cannot take it for granted that I'm going to give that child more money when I pass away because of how close they were when I was alive. You don't know what child is going to benefit you after you have gone. You have no idea whether those other 3 children will wake up after you are gone and will pray for you every single day and will give sadaqah on your behalf, even though they didn't do it when you were alive, and will fast on your behalf, or will make hajj on your behalf, or will open a school or donate a well on your behalf. No one knows. So we shouldn't think to ourselves we're going to reward certain kids because they were good when we were alive. How do you know if that child even prays for you one time after you've gone away? So Allah has fixed the portions. Everyone's getting what is fair, because you have no idea what child is going to benefit you more after you are gone. And we don't want to create any hatred at that time. My father, he cut me out the will. He only gave me this much. I was living my life. I was busy. And now you don't know that that was the child. Had you given him equal to his brothers or given her equal to her sisters, they would be praying for you every single day. And you will come on the day of judgment with the tremendous deeds that you didn't do, but they did the work for you. Ayah number 12. The next ayah, Allah says, in what your wives leave, your share is half. If they leave no child, but if they leave a child, they get a fourth, after payment of the legacies and debts. In what ye leave, their share is a fourth, if ye leave no child, but if they leave, then they get an eighth, after payment of the legacies and the debts. If the man or woman whose inheritance is in question has left neither ascendants nor descendants, but has left a brother or a sister, each one of the 2 gets a sixth. But if more than 2, they share a third, after payments of the legacies and the debts, so that no loss is caused to anyone. Thus, it is ordained by Allah, and Allah is all-knowing, all-forbearing. We notice that after every ayah where Allah describes who gets what, He reminds you, I have made it this way. Meaning, adhere to these rules. Don't play with me. The next ayah, Allah again, He talks about the wives and the husbands. He talks about the siblings. And He ends the ayah by saying what? Thus, it is ordained by Allah. And Allah is all-knowing and most forbearing. I have ordained this. Ayah number 176. Allah says, they ask you for a legal decision. Say, Allah directs us about those who leave no descendants or ascendants as heirs. If it is a man that dies leaving a sister but no child, she shall have half of the inheritance. If such a deceased was a woman who left no child, her brother takes her inheritance. If there are 2 sisters, they shall have 2/3 of inheritance between them. If there are brothers and a sister, they share, the male having twice the share of the female. Thus does Allah make clear to you His law, lest ye err, and Allah has knowledge of all things. So is it optional to follow the Fara'id? Do we have a choice in this matter? Is it something like, oh, it sounds good, the Islamic inheritance system sounds good, but if I don't want to do it, I don't have to do it? Is following the Fara'id optional? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah An-Nisa in verses 13 and 14. Remember, these are the 2 verses that come after 11 and 12, which detail the inheritance system. Allah says, these are the limits set by Allah. Those who obey Allah and His Messenger will be admitted into gardens which rivers flow beneath, to abide therein forever. And that will be the supreme achievement. But those who disobey Allah and His Messenger and transgress His limits will be admitted into the fire therein, and therein they shall have a humiliating punishment. So again, is following the Fara'id optional? It is not optional. Before we continue, I want to ask you, what are your thoughts thus far? Do you think the system, Islamic inheritance system, is better than the Western system? How do you think heirs will respond to this division where people are not getting the same money? People are getting a sixth and a third and a fourth and a quarter and an eighth. And how many of you, up until this point, have heard all that was said before, or who heard something they've never heard before? This is a question for the audience. Let me just get 3 people to participate in answering any one of these 3 questions. Please.
I think when non-Muslims initially see how things are divided, they might think it's unfair, but if you were to analyze what happens in this country more often than not with all the fighting, they end up suffering more, and then their families end up
Divided and broken.
Yeah. And I think, part of this, I guess I never reflected on before, how Allah says that you don't know who will benefit you. There's so many examples where people, certain calamities that happen when they lose their parents or whatever, it changes their connection to Allah. And it's the wisdom that Allah has that maybe this is the turning point they needed in their lives to then become kids that make dua for their parents, and then that will be their ticket to Jannah that they don't think about.
Great, subhanAllah, very good. Anyone else want to say anything?
I think the natural responsibility that Allah has created men and women is by distributing the responsibilities which the non-Muslims doesn't follow. And then they actually see these things something out of their mind, like they don't see the logic in this. But if they follow this thing, the main responsibility that Allah has ordained, then everything will set into place. So I think this is the main thing that they are not able to understand and visualize that why this thing is there.
Correct. And the brother in the back?
Yes, actually, participating on some of what I'm going to say. For anybody who grew up in an Islamic society where at the very beginning we taught that the man in the family is the one who has the responsibility to provide, to bring clothing, roof, and food on the table for the whole family, including the wife, then hearing the principles of inheritance did not surprise them.
Correct.
But when the family is raised in the West and you don't tell them about what they hear from the West,
Correct.
the family will be as shocked as Westerners because they question, they just bring it to why would a man have 2 and a woman?
Correct.
One, they don't see all the other parts.
Correct.
It's a wholesome thing, not just one.
Exactly. That was a really great point that he made, that he first spoke about the Westerners and how they would view the system, and then he ended by mentioning that we're raising our children in the same system, and if we don't have this conversation, they're going to have the same outlook. They're going to see it as being not fair. I have plenty of phone calls, sisters on the phone talking about, where's the justice in this? Why am I getting half of what my brother's getting? He's never around, he wasn't there. And I'm like, sister, that's not the point. And it's hard to have that conversation at that point. When I think to myself, in her passion, her parents should have had this conversation a long time ago, right? So let us continue. Now we're going to discuss the fundamentals of Fara'id. The Ashab al-Furud, the fixed heirs. Ashab al-Furud, or the fixed heirs, are the individuals entitled to predetermined portions of the deceased's estate, as specified in the Quran. Their shares are fixed, meaning they have a priority over the residual heirs. So there are those who get a fixed portion, they take their money first, and then what remains goes to the residual heirs. So they come first. First is the payments of debts and loans, funeral expenses, and then those who get fixed share, ashab al-furud, they take their money, and then the residual heirs get their money. That is the order in which the deceased's money is executed. First and foremost is their funeral arrangements. It comes from their money. Their money that they leave behind is used to bury them first. Then thereafter, their debts are paid with their money, not their children's money. And then after that, then the fixed shares take their money, then the residual share take their money, and then the money is done. Okay? It should be noted as well that when it comes to the debts that our parents leave behind, we know that the Prophet ﷺ emphasized the importance of paying off the debts because it can cause a person to be left in suspension. They won't enter paradise until their debts are settled. That does not mean that a child now has to take this humongous burden and pay his father's $100,000 debt that he raised. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, the scholar, he said, the debts are paid from the parents' estate. And if all that money runs out and there's still a debt over that parent, it is not your responsibility to use your own money to pay off their debts. It is money from their estate, what they left behind. However, if a person is in a position where they can pay off their parents' debt for the sake of their parents and for the sake of the family and the name and the legacy, then they should do so. But they are under no obligation to use their own money to pay off the debts of others. Is that clear? Because I feel there's confusion in that. We hear pay the debts, I have to pay my parents' debts, I have to pay my parents' debts. Yes, it's important, yes, from their money. So that means if you had to use all of their money and no one inherited anything, then that's what you have to do.
What happens if it doesn't cover all the debts?
Then that's it. That's on them.
So they just lose out whatever is owed.
You mean those who stand to inherit?
Well, no, the people who still are owed the debts, if the state doesn't cover the full debt that they're owed,
Then they lost.
so they lose it.
Yeah, then they lose. Then they lose. But it wouldn't be a responsibility and it wouldn't be fair on those who didn't incur the debt to have to now pay the debt.
The funeral expenses has to be paid from that money, or the children can pay it?
It has to be paid from their money.
But if one of the children pays it out,
Well, then he should be entitled to a reimbursement of that from the estate. If he paid it out in the moment, sometimes you cannot access the estate's money until weeks after. But whatever child stood up and said, I'll pay it, should be reimbursed because the funeral expense is supposed to be taken from the deceased's money first, then debts.
but if the child willingly pays it off,
Well, that's on him or her. That's on them, him or her. But the estate is supposed to pay it. And if that son or daughter wanted to be reimbursed, they would be entitled to be reimbursed, right? Not 10 years later, hey, by the way, I just took this class. You missed it. Just make sure you tell everyone else, right?
Sure. The Ashab al-Furud, before they receive their share, you said the debts and the funeral expenses. Was there anything else?
No, that's it. Debts and funeral expenses are paid.
Does the funeral expense take priority to the debts?
Yes, because the person has to be buried.
Yeah.
You can't we're gonna leave the body until the debts are paid, and then what? The person has to be buried. So his funeral is paid first. Her funeral is paid first. Then the debts are paid. There's two types of debt: secured debt and not secured debt. And then the heirs are paid, the ashab al-furu, and then the residual. And the difference between the secured debt and the unsecured debt is the secured debt is in the sense of money, in the sense of I loaned this individual $5,000, here's the contract, your father owed me, never paid me back, please let me get my money, you give him. And then the unsecured debt would be in the case of property, the car that your father's driving is my car actually, can I get my car back? I loaned him the car. Right? It's not really money in the sense of no one's thinking, I gotta sell every car, sell every t-shirt, sell every laptop to make money, right? But some of those things that our parents may possess may be a loan or may have been borrowed, right? And it's only after the time of death that the person comes to say, hey, can I get that blender back? Your mom kind of asked for it to make the naan, and I don't know if you use a blender to make naan, I'm just saying. She asked for the blender 5 years ago, and I kind of need my blender back. You give her back the blender. Okay? So who are the ashab al-furud? They are generally the spouse, parents, grandparents, daughters, sons, daughters, full sisters, paternal half-sisters, maternal siblings, half-brothers and half-sisters, and grandmothers on the women's side, uterine grandmothers. When we say grandparents, we're talking about the grandparents on the father's side, the mother's grandparents, the mother's parents. These are those who get fixed shares if they exist.
So, grandparents are maternal or paternal?
Both. So we have the grandparents, and then we have the maternal grandmother, not the maternal grandfather. So regular grandparents, right? Let's say a man, he dies, his parents inherit from him, right? His mother and his father. Those are considered grandparents. They stand to inherit. And then we have the uterine grandmother, meaning his mother's mother would inherit if she exists, and if she exists. But normally, they're not in this position because it is the normal course of things that children bury their parents, right? That the parents are gone before we are gone. When it comes to the husband, he's entitled to 1/2 if the deceased leaves no children or grandchildren. Meaning, he's married to his wife, they have no children. He's entitled to 1/2 of all her money when she dies. And then the other 1/2 goes to anyone else on this list that is still alive. And the husband only gets 1/4 if there are children. And they must be married at the time of death. The wife only gets 1/4 if there are no children, and 1/8 if there are children. So we see here this idea of the man getting double the portion of the woman, the son gets 2 times what the daughter gets. We see as a principle in Islamic inheritance that whenever men and women are of same status, the man gets double what the woman gets. So whether it's brother and sister, he gets double. Whether it's husband and wife, he gets double. The only time when that isn't in place is when it's 2 grandparents, meaning the grandfather and the grandmother. It is determined that they get a 1/6 or a 1/4. However, the scholars have deducted that even that in certain situations where there are no grandchildren, the grandfather will get double what the grandmother gets, even though it's not explicitly mentioned. But because that is the way Allah made it in harmony, they continue that process. Does that make sense? It's not mentioned that the grandfather gets this. It's mentioned that the grandparents get this one portion. But the scholars, they say, no, when we look at this system, we see at every level, the man is always getting more. So where there's an opportunity, when it comes to the grandfather and grandmother, in the specific cases, the grandfather will get more than the grandmother, even though that has not been explicitly stated. But it is with keeping in harmony with what Allah has legislated. When it comes to the mother, she gets 1/3 if there are no children, and she gets a 1/6 if there are children. And when we say mother, we're talking about the grandparents. Okay, because wife is really the mom, right? Husband is dad. Mother is grandma. Okay? The grandfather gets a 1/6 if there is children. And he turns into a residual share if there are no children. What does that mean? That means if there are children, he will take a 1/6. So let's say a wife passes away. She leaves a husband. She leaves one son. And she has her father. The father comes in and takes a 6. Uh, uh, her father takes a sixth. Her husband takes a quarter. And then what remains goes to the son. But if there is no son and she dies, leaving behind a husband and her father, because there is no children, he is not ashab al-furud anymore. He's considered residual, meaning he gets what's left after everyone else takes their portion. And in this particular case, the only person that takes a portion is who? The husband. Because there's no children, he gets half of the estate. What remains? Half will go to her father. So remember, every case is different because people leave different people behind, right? So I could give you 100 different examples that would this program will go on for 3 days, right? But the point is for us to just kind of understand how these shares change depending on if the children exist. If children exist, they get less. If children do not exist, some of these ashab al-furud inherit what remains, inherit as if they were children, for lack of a better word. When it comes to daughters, they get a half or 2/3. Meaning, he leaves behind one daughter, he leaves behind a wife. The wife will take an eighth, which leaves 7/8, and then the daughter, because she left one daughter, she gets half. And then what remains goes to the residual heirs, those who are residual. If there are 2 daughters, they get 2/3, and the wife gets an eighth. And if there's anything left behind, it goes towards the residual heirs. But if a son exists, the daughter no longer inherits a fixed portion. She inherits as a residual, meaning whatever's left over. So a husband dies, his wife takes an eighth. He has 1 son, 1 daughter. What's left over? What's left over is 7/8. The daughter doesn't take a fixed share because the brother exists. So because the brother exists, now she becomes a residual like him, which means the 7/8 that's left over is now divided 2-1. Is that clear? So the daughter can either can inherit as a fixed share, or she can inherit as residual, depending on if she got a brother or not. The son's daughters are similar to the daughter in the sense of they inherit half if there are no children, and they inherit 2/3 if there are no sons or daughters. But if there are children, then they don't inherit, because the son's daughter wouldn't inherit. If her father exists, then he would get the money. Meaning, a husband passes away, he has 1 son, 1 daughter. That son ends up having a child, so now he has a daughter. When he passes away, the father, his wife gets an eighth because she's married to him, and then what remains is divided between the son and the daughter. But if he passed away, then the daughter would get, remember, she's gonna get as a fixed share now, because there's no brother anymore, and his daughter will inherit as well. Again, the system is really interesting, to say the least, how this system works. Please.
What is asaba, acting as a son?
Asaba means acting as someone who gets a fixed share. So that means that if the son's sons are present, she will act as a person getting a fixed share. The full sisters also inherit, or can inherit. They get it half if there's only 1 sister and no brothers, and no children and no father, the full sister. They get 2/3 if there are 2 or more if they are two or more and there are no brothers and no children and no father. So we're going through this list of all these people that inherit. But to make it simple, once the son exists, nobody gets nothing. All right? If there's a son, nobody gets nothing. It goes to him and his sister and their mother. That's it. And a grandparent. Everybody else that I'm mentioning, full sister, half sister, uncle, sister, this, that, they don't get nothing. But if the son doesn't exist, then all these people get something. And again, it makes sense that once the son exists, he blocks out everybody else from getting, because now he has to get the money to provide for himself and his family and his sister and his mom and everyone else. So how could they take when he's going to be responsible to feed them? The same people that's taking. So this is why we see over and over in all the brackets, if the son exists, if there are children, if there's children, you see that they get nothing, or they get half, or they get if they get nothing. But if there are no children, if there are no son, then they get a portion. The paternal half sister gets a half if there are no brothers and no children, no father and no full sibling. Or they get 2/3. If there are two or more, if it's two half sisters, they get 2/3, which is similar as if there was only two daughters. Remember, the daughter gets a half by herself, 2/3 together. So the rule applies the same. Half sisters, it applies the same. The son's daughter, it applies the same. If there are two or more, 2/3. If it's one, a half. But that's if there's no son that exists. Once a son exists, they don't get anything. The maternal siblings, meaning stepbrothers from the mother's side, right? Because a father could have two wives, whether simultaneously or he could have been married 2 or 3 times. So if you have brothers and sisters, you share the same father, but you don't share the same mother, that's what a uterine brother is. Meaning it's your stepbrother, but from a mother that you don't share. They will get 1/6 for one sibling, or 1/3 shared equally among them 2 or more. And obviously that's when no children are present. No children, no grandparent, no father, no grandfather. If any of these people exist, they're blocked. So if there's a son, they get nothing. If there's grandparents, they get nothing. If there's grandchildren, they get nothing. If there's a paternal grandfather, they get nothing. If there's none of these, then the half siblings from the mother's side will exist, because they're still connected to you by blood. You share the same father. That gives them a right to a portion of the wealth. But obviously, in 90% of the time, they never inherit, because there's a son, or there's a father, or there's a grandparent. And the grandparents, the maternal mother, grandmother, and paternal grandfather, they get 1/6 if no mother is alive, and if neither mother or father is alive, they get 1/6. So if the husband dies and there is no wife, they get 1/6 each. And I mentioned here that they get 1/6 if no mother is alive, or no mother or father is alive. We see here them getting the same. Right? There's equality here. However, certain cases, even though they are entitled to the same, as I mentioned, the scholars will at times give the grandfather a bit more. But this we're looking at right now is just maternal grandmother and paternal grandmother, not grandfather and grandmother. They're both women. One on the father's side, one on the mother's side. The 10 categories that we listed are all of those who would be entitled to inherit as Ashab al-Furud, meaning those who get fixed portions. Again, they do not all inherit at the same time. Many of them are negated from inheriting because of the existence of someone else who is superior to them. However, these are all of the categories that Allah has mentioned explicitly, and the Prophet has mentioned explicitly, those who are entitled to fixed portions. Yes.
So just for like a practical application, if a husband and wife own a home together, whether it's
If a husband and wife what?
they own a home together,
Mhm.
whether both of their names are on the title for the house or just one or the other, and the first one of them to pass away, does that home then also get distributed amongst the heirs? And in a situation like that, like let's say the husband dies, the wife obviously still needs shelter to live in. Would that have to be sold and then the value of the house get distributed?
So when you say they own it together, do they really own it together, or he bought it and she just lives in it and he's like, that's my wife? And
Let's say either situation, let's say in one situation, they both have their names on the title, and in another,
having your name on the title doesn't make you the owner if you owned it or not.
it was purchasing it.
You know, I bought my house and I put my wife's name on the title. She didn't pay a cent for that house.
Okay, let's say the husband paid.
So we have to be specific because my answer is going to change per case. So you got to give me one so we can stick to it so I can answer it. Give me the situation.
Yeah.
Do they own it together or he owned it? She just live in it.
Well, then let's say he owns it, but then there's also gonna be a situation where.
No, don't say then. Just give me one because there's so many.
Yeah.
Give me one.
Let's say he owns it.
Think about our parents back home, right?
Yeah.
And our grandparents. The mom lived in the apartment that the father bought. We never look at it in terms of that's my grandmother's owns that house. It's the grandfather that owns the house. He married her, he provided the living space for her. She lives in it, but she don't own it.
Yeah, okay. So let's say the husband owns it then.
All right, so the husband owns it. Talk to me now.
Yeah, so if he passes away and they have children, or even
Okay.
if he didn't,
His wife would be entitled to 1/4 if there are children.
yeah,
So let's say you said she's living in it, and the children are like, well, we have to sell dad's house. And the mom is like, well, no, I'm gonna stay here. Well, then they have a decision to make because that house that's left behind is a part of the inheritance and they're entitled to it. They could either be patient and say, hey, listen, the house is there. We already know I'm getting 2/3, you're getting 1/3. Let mom live there. You're working, I'm working. When she dies, we'll split it then. If they're going to be greedy and say, mom, you got to get out so we can sell because now this is going to help take my career to the next level, they would be entitled to do so because that is the inheritance that's left behind, right? That'd be a very hard conversation to throw your mom out of the house. Most of us would be happy that she's comfortable where she's at and leave her in place, right? But
It doesn't have to be right after the death.
it doesn't have to be right after, yeah, you know. But eventually, it comes down the line, and the children automatically have this ownership, even if it's not sold. Intrinsically they possess that ownership. So once the father passes away, and there's a house left, his wife gets 1/4, and then the son and the daughter split the 3/4, 2-1. Even if they didn't sell anything, that's their ownership.
now if there aren't any children involved and the other heirs want to kick her out of the house to get their share.
I don't think they'd be able to do that under the law here.
Okay.
I don't think they would be able to do that. You can't kick out a husband's wife out of her home and he has no children. That wouldn't be illegal at all.
Okay.
So his father leaves the wife and the children as well, and they decide that okay, let the house be there, and once the mother passes away,
Yeah.
and then they get from the father's like 2:1 share.
Yes.
For example, one.
Correct.
Okay.
One gets 2/3, one get 1/3. That's a 2-1 ratio. It'd be like their father's house is divided into 3 slices. The son gets 2 slices, the daughter gets 1 slice. At the time that they sell.
If they decide to wait and not distribute, and in that time frame, one of the inheritors passes away, then obviously, then do their children?
Of course, because that one that passed away owned a certain amount or from the time that her father died. She already owned. So those who survive are supposed to give her children or his children what they automatically owned at the time of their parents passing.
So it hasn't been distributed, but then it is theirs.
It's theirs. You can't take it from them. It's theirs. It's theirs.
So even if they pass it before they actually physically get it, it's still theirs.
It's theirs.
Children get it.
Yes, it's theirs. Yeah, they have ownership. As soon as the person passes away, ownership is transferred automatically. And this is why one of the areas in which we take when we're studying Islamic inheritance to be licensed, we take the case of multiple death, which is the most complicated portion of the inheritance system. Imagine if there is a car with a family in it, and the husband, the father, and 3 kids, and they crash, and the husband dies, and the mother dies, and the children survive, right? It's not as clear cut to say, well, they both died, because technically, who died first? Because if the father died first, then his wife becomes automatically 1/4 richer. And then if she died after, then you'd have to divide that portion based upon the numbers. So that is the most difficult part of the science when we study the multiple deaths. People dying multiply, it's not just they died. Who died first changes how much each person has, which changes how much their heirs inherit. Does that make sense? That's the most simplest way I could explain it without growing gray hair, thinking about, those cases, which are extremely challenging.
Yeah, but going further from the brother said, right, that one inheritor passed away. What if there is no will written by the inheritor?
What do you mean if there's no will?
I mean, that inheritor, he passed away without a will. So, whether his wife, son, they will get that property which...
Well, that's a whole nother question. I'm dealing with the Islamic side of it, right? How that works in the state that you're in, being in America, will they have the right to it? Will they be entitled to it? That's a whole nother question, right? Here in the States, that's a legal matter. What I'm explaining to you is Islamically what they're entitled to and what their right is.
It's just a simple answer to that question.
Oh, please, yes, please answer his question.
If you die without a will, then the state takes over and everything goes into state.
Wow.
So if there's no will, then that's it.
The state takes the whole thing?
Yes.
Even
It
though if you're a
goes-
child?
No, it goes through the laws of the interstate, so the American laws will.
Supersede. Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Usually favors spouses, right?
Yes. So if you don't have a will, that's what happens.
Okay.
Just to go back to the question I had about the home, in a scenario where there is a wife, let's say maybe a daughter, and there are residual heirs, regardless of whether this country would protect them from being kicked out Islamically, or is there any protection for them to stay in the home, especially if it's like a young child, before the residual heirs kind of force them to get their share? Or would they have to pay out their share to them just to keep the whole house and stay there?
So there are going to be situations in which a person may feel that it benefits them to get their money and run. Let's say a husband passes away and his mother is living in the home and the children are somewhat adults and they're comfortable with their grandmother staying in that home. But the wife is not blood. She wants her eighth and she want to run. She needs to be paid off and then she can move on with her life. We cannot expect her to just wait until grandma dies. That's not her grandmother. Okay? She's not blood. So she should be taken care of. Right? And Islamically, she would be entitled to getting something, to getting her eighth. If this was a Muslim country, the family would have to find a way to give her her eighth. If you want to keep the house, that's on you. No wrong with it. Can you pay her her eighth of what the house is worth? Then she'll move on with her life. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, give the Fara'id to those who are entitled to receive it, and whatever is left should be given to closest male relatives of the deceased. Sahih Bukhari. We see here the command to give the fixed portions, not make them wait, not this or that. Give their portions to them. Whatever they're entitled to, they give it to them. Obviously, in a family, mom, father, daughter, mother, is different. Everyone is okay with mom living in the house and okay with mom still using the car. It would be very unfortunate for a son or a daughter to be like, no, we have to sell dad's car and I didn't get my money. Bro, it's your mom. Your mom's going to use the car to go get groceries and go to a doctor's appointment. You know, alhamdulillah, I haven't had to deal with a phone call like that yet. I don't think we've reached that level of being despicable. But those who are entitled should get their money, should get their fixed share, and then the rest is left to the closest male relative. We have asaba, which is the residual here, meaning those who inherit after those who take their fixed portion have taken, what's left over, those are called the asaba. Their share is not fixed, like a son. A son doesn't have a fixed share. He gets whatever is left after those who get the fixed shares take their money. Asaba, residual heirs, are individuals who inherit the remaining estate after the fixed shares of the Ashab al-Furud have been distributed. If there are no Ashab al-Furud or no remainder after their shares, the Asaba may inherit the entire estate. If a father dies and he only has one son and he has no parents and his wife is not there, that one son takes it all. Their shares are not fixed but dependent upon the amount that is left after the Ashab al-Furud take their portions. There are three categories of those who are considered residual heirs. Asaba bi nafsihi, meaning they are residual heirs because they exist within themselves. Compare that to daughters. Daughters can become residual heirs with the existence of a brother, but normally they're just getting fixed shares. But the son, the grandsons, the fathers, paternal grandfathers, full brothers, paternal half-brothers, sons of full brothers, sons of paternal half-brothers, paternal uncles, and sons of the paternal uncles, they are within themselves, by themselves, considered residuary. And as the Prophet, he mentioned, pay the fixed shares, and after the fixed shares are paid, then you give it to the closest male relative at the time. These are the list of the closest male relatives that the Prophet is speaking about. Obviously, the son, he's going to take it all. Everyone underneath him doesn't get nothing. But then you have the grandsons, and you have the fathers, paternal grandfathers, paternal mother, full brother, full mother, paternal half-brothers, sons of the half-brothers. All of this, they are also considered near relatives. So if a person were to pass away, they have no sons, no grandsons, no father, no paternal father, no full brothers, no half-brothers, no uncles, but they have their uncle's sons would inherit. So you see how it's like a checklist. All these people are in front of you. So how many times does the uncle's son inherit? Never. I mean, when was the last time you heard of an uncle's son inheriting from your father passing away? It doesn't happen because there's so many people along the way that would get before him. But if there were none of these people existed, they would get. Yes.
So the maternal grandfather is not included?
No, he's not. Only the paternal. Money is transferred through the lineage of the father and his brothers, his parents, his brothers, his sons. Yes.
Are trusts permissible to transfer ownership at the time of death, or is that kind of like
I don't even know what that is.
So like if you put your house in a trust, then at the time of your death, like you can designate that the ownership transfers to a certain person. So this way now, I guess
You would have to transfer it as long as you could divide that ownership.
The trust owns it. Yeah, the trust is the owner of it at that point. And then if certain things happen at the time of your death, then the ownership of that now goes to someone else. So is that considered like cheating the system, or is that?
I still don't even know what you're talking about. That's above me. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I understand what you're talking about, but I don't know the Islamic.
So in a trust, if you own a home and I decide I want to put my home in a trust, I can have a legal, entity now become the owner of the home. I no longer own it. But at the time of my death, I can designate that the ownership of that home will then go from the trust owning it to someone else, like my
To
spouse.
who?
To my spouse, for example. Now she's 100% owner of the home. So it kind of almost removes it from my ownership for something like this. This way, if I wanted to make sure my wife kept the house 100% and no one else touched it, I would do that during my lifetime, designate a trust as the owner of the home instead of myself, and then a certain condition like myself passing away will trigger a transfer of ownership.
That doesn't even sound, it doesn't even sound like a foolproof plan, because from what I'm hearing, in the end, your death puts you in a position of ownership again, because you determine who gets it after you're gone. So it just sounds like, it sounds complicated, but in essence, you still owned it from the very beginning. You never lost it.
Yeah, there's something called a revocable trust that you can just cancel at any time during your life. In an irrevocable trust, or at the point that you make it, you cannot change it anymore. So you'll never be the owner of that home.
Okay.
But in a certain like event that triggers like you passing away, if you designate that at the time of like creating this trust, then the ownership will transfer from the trust to.
Yeah, and the sin will be on you.
Okay.
Simple.
But usually people create trusts for children. So in other words, if they pass away and the kids are young in age, the trust is there, so they, like, for example, a 10-year-old won't get the whole property because he's too young.
Yeah.
So later on, when he's like 21, 25, then he can inherit. So that's
Okay.
the reason why people do it.
So I'm sure that even when it comes to this trust system, it can still be put detailed in such a way that is in harmony with our Islamic principles and values, period. And so that should be the priority. It's making it align with what Allah has said, because Allah has already made his threats and he made it very clear. So, I guess a person could say, well, technically I didn't own Allah, and I say, all right, you gamble, you do it, not me. I'll watch here and good luck.
So like you just said, in a trust, if it's possible, and in a will, it would make sense to word the will also in
Everything,
alignment with what Sharia says.
everything. Yeah, 100%.
That way, no one can take your property, and the way you want to distribute it according to your will.
Correct.
Or the trust is in conformity with what the Sharia says.
Correct.
I think maybe I could word it better. A trust, if you make a trust, you're no longer the owner of that, whatever you put in that trust. So it won't be considered part of my estate anymore when I pass away. That's what's called like a living trust. It's almost like when you said the scenario that if you're sound and you're healthy and you decide you want to just donate all your wealth to the masjid, it's almost kind of like doing that while you're alive. Like, I don't want this car, this house, this bank account to be considered my property while I'm alive. So this way, when I do die, it's not up for grabs when I pass away. Like, there's a designated.
But you still had a say for who gets it after you passed away.
Well, I know, but you're doing that while you're alive, though.
Okay, but it only gets executed at the time of your death. So it's considered at your death. It's not considered while you're alive anymore. When you make the decision while you're alive, it's irrevocable. If you decide to sell your house tomorrow and you just made the decision, it's gone.
Yeah.
You don't, like, it doesn't magically reappear again when you die and being given to someone else. You made a decision in a moment and it's done. And it's sold. And no one can benefit from it after because you sold it. Compare that to a person that says, I don't own the house anymore, but at the time I die, give it to somebody else. You own it, brother. I don't know how we could word it. You own it. You made the decision. You planned it out that when you die, someone else takes it. I can't explain the how, but I know the outcome. At the end of the day, you had this phone. You said, hold the phone for me. When I die, give it to my wife. Bro, that's clear. You still owned it, even though you technically didn't own it, because you decided that it goes to your wife. And Allah decided that it goes to your wife, your kids, and your parents. You're going to be in big trouble on Day of Judgment. Period. Because you could have said, put it this, and this. You chose to put it to one over the other. You chose to go against direct command. You're finished. Unless Allah decides to be merciful. And Allah can forgive anything.
I think one point they did not make is people create these trusts also for tax purposes. But I think for Muslims, we just have to, like I said, make it so that the trust is in line.
That's it.
with the Sharia,
Simple.
Not the Sharia in line with the trust.
There we go. I like the way you said that. Beautiful, exactly. Make your trust in line with the Sharia, period. And we won't have to worry about any of this. We have asaba ma'a ghayrihi. Those who are residual with others. These are female relatives who become residual heirs when paired with a specific male heir. Such as a daughter becomes an asaba when paired with a son, meaning brother and sister. Sons' daughters become asaba when paired with sons. Full sisters become asaba when paired with full brothers, half sisters when paired with half brothers. And then we have asaba bi ghayrihi, meaning they're residual by themselves. And these are females who inherit as residual only in the presence of specific males, such as the daughter inherits as a residual heir in the presence of a son. And sons, daughters inherit when present with sons. And full sisters inherit as residual when paired with full brothers and the like. The conditions for becoming a residual here is number one, priority based on closeness to the deceased. Asaba inherits based on their degree of relationship to the deceased. Closer relatives exclude more distant ones. Sons exclude brothers and uncles. If there are multiple asaba in the same category, such as two sons, they share equally, with males receiving twice as much as the females. When no fixed heir exists, if there are no asaba al-furud, then the asaba inherit the entire estate. Residual inheritance. After fixed shares are distributed to the ashab al-furud, the remaining estate is given to the residual heir, the asaba. Equal distribution among males. If multiple males in the same category, such as 7 sons, they all inherit equally. 10 sons, they all inherit equally. And the exclusion of closer relatives. Closer male relatives exclude more distant ones. Right? Sons exclude uncles and cousins and half siblings. The share of asaba depends on what remains after the ashab al-furud receive their fixed share. Here are examples of how the shares are distributed. Example 1, a son. If a deceased leaves a wife and a son, the wife gets 1/8, the son inherits as asaba. If there was a daughter, he would inherit 2-1 to her, but if a husband passes away, leaving only a wife and a son, the wife will get 1/8 and the son will get 7/8. If there are 5 sons, the wife will get 1/8 and the 7/8 will be divided equally amongst the 5 sons. Example number 2, if the deceased leaves behind a spouse and children, the father gets 1/6 of the share plus the remaining estate as asaba if no other residual heirs exist. Meaning, if a wife dies, she leaves behind a husband, her father, and 1 daughter. The husband gets 1/4, the grandfather gets 1/6, the daughter gets 1/2, and if there's anything left, that father inherits as the nearest male relative again. So he becomes asaba because there was no son. So he inherits residual. If there was a son, he would just get the 6, he'd get no more. But because there is no son, he inherits whatever is left over. Meaning in this particular case, the husband would get 1/4, the daughter would get 1/2, and he would get the rest. But if there was a son, he would only get 1/6. The third example is of a brother. If there are no children, parents, or spouse that exist, the full brother inherits the entire estate. If a woman dies, she has no husband, she has no children, and her parents are dead, her full brother gets her whole estate. That means if she had two brothers, they would split her whole estate equally. Paternal grandfather, in the absence of a father, but with ashab al-furud, the paternal grandparents may inherit a fixed share of 1/6 or as a residual if there are no sons that exist. The key points: males are primary asaba. You saw the list. It's all sons, full brothers, half brothers, husbands, fathers, grandparents, paternal grandparents. Females are secondary because they become residual because of the existence of the son. And there is, we see, a hierarchy in inheritance. Meaning, there are those, because they exist, they deny others from getting. So there is a level of hierarchy. Non-heirs. In Islamic inheritance law, some relatives or individuals are excluded from inheriting under specific conditions. The exclusion can occur due to various reasons based on proximity, the existence of closer heirs, or specific prohibitions. Below is a detailed explanation of those who do not inherit under what condition. Individuals excluded due to their close heirs. Certain relatives are excluded from inheriting because a closer heir exists. A son exists, the uncle doesn't inherit. The full brother doesn't inherit. The half brother doesn't inherit. Because the son exists, he's excluded. Another example is a person excluded due to a specific action. Certain acts or behaviors can disqualify an individual from inheriting, even if they would otherwise be entitled, such as apostasy. If a father dies, he leaves behind two sons. All he has is two sons. One is Muslim and the other one decided to change his religion, become Christian. His Christian son cannot inherit from him. His Jewish son cannot inherit from him. His Hindu son cannot inherit from him. His son that's no longer Muslim, dad, listen, I'm not Muslim. I don't think about this religion. I don't like it. I'm going to change. I'm just going to be a free spirit. I'm going to just, reach out to nature. I'm going to just live. No problem. You will not inherit. It's just the way it goes. But it's a two-way street. Let's say that son that left Islam and is only a father with two sons. That son becomes Elon Musk. Elon Musk's net worth right now is $400 billion. And then he dies. You as a father get nothing from him because it's different religion. It's both ways. I don't inherit from you and you don't inherit from me. It doesn't matter if you have $1 trillion. I won't touch $1 after you pass away, and you're not entitled to $1 after I pass away. Murder. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, the one who kills does not inherit. And this is a person who intentionally kills a deceased for the purpose of inheriting. Because the scholars, they said, how could this hadith mean the person who kills doesn't inherit? Those who participate in the Battle of Badr, they killed other people and yet they inherited. So it's talking about specifically, even though the Prophet didn't say it, what he meant was, if I killed my father for the sake of getting the money, I am not entitled to the money anymore. There are children who kill their parents so that they can inherit. Islam says if that is discovered, that nullifies you from inheriting.
So going back to apostasy, if a person converts to Islam and his family is not Muslim, not because of apostasy,
He gets nothing.
Well, if he dies, do his non-Muslim kids get anything? If it's not because of apostasy, but he just converts to Islam?
His non-Muslim kids don't follow the Sharia. Why would they
Well,
even care about what we're doing?
Well, can he leave anything for them?
He can leave up to 1/3 of his estate to anyone. That's the bequest.
What would happen to the rest of it? if he has no non-Muslim.
I guess the state would take it according to the sister.
So he can only bequeath 1/3 to the non-Muslim relatives, and the rest has to be taken by the state.
And I guess so.
It's whatever his will says. So if he dies without a will, then it's through the state. It goes through the state. But if he has a will, then whatever his will.
Yeah.
Like
But I
just
see what you're saying. If a
sad
person's
thing.
non-Muslim, if he converts, he already was married, had his kids, he lived that life. Now it's just him, and now he dies. Then what happens with his estate? What he needs to do is he needs to say 1/3 goes towards his family and 2/3 goes to charity, because otherwise it's going to go to his family who are not entitled to it, or it's going to go to the state.
Okay.
So 2/3 will go to the masjid, ICCC, and 1/3 will go to my kids. A child born out of wedlock does not inherit from the biological father, but may inherit from the mother. Exclusion due to gender or lineage rules. Some relatives do not inherit due to the nature of their relationship or the gender as specified in Islamic law. Again, we mentioned that there are those who get nullified because of the existence of other heirs. And so when we say they do not inherit as a result of gender, what we're really saying is if the son exists, they're not a boy, they're getting nothing. Right? And we're talking about aunts and sisters and these individuals. It is their gender that prevented them from inheriting. It's just a fancy way of repeating the first one, that those who are closer to the deceased get, and compared to those who are further away from the deceased. We have exclusion due to blocking. The principle of exclusion due to blocking appears when a closer hair blocks a hair that is more distant in the same category. And again, a lot of this sounds like repetition, but there are so many different cases that each of these speak to a particular case. Non-heirs, oh, go ahead.
I'm not sure
Let me go
what
back.
blocking means. What exactly does it
So the example here is brothers and sisters blocked by the deceased, sons or grandsons. So if a husband dies, he doesn't have any son or daughter, but he has grandchildren. Those grandchildren block his full brothers and sisters from getting. Because now his grandchildren are like his children, and they inherit based upon the rule 2-to-1. So you notice that the verbiage is used blocked when it comes to grandchildren, and then when it comes to regular sons, like the primary sons, the verbiage is used excluded due to the close heirs. So again, it's case by case under different title, but in principle it's the same thing. You could say the son blocks the uncles from inheriting, but we don't use that language. We just say the son is closer, so they don't inherit. But when it comes to grandchildren, we say their existence blocks full brothers and sisters from inheriting. Non-heirs according to Islamic law. Some individuals do not inherit under any circumstance unless explicitly included in a will, up to 1/3. Meaning, a Muslim man marries a non-Muslim woman, a Christian or Jewish woman. Is that permissible? It is permissible. At the time of his death, this woman who gave him 10 children was dedicated to him for 60 years, wept at his funeral, did everything for him, brought no pork in the house, brought no alcohol in the house, made the house according to his rules. He passes away. What does she get? That sucks, doesn't it? Isn't that? She gave him 10 children. Muhammad, Ahmed, Layla, Jamila, Fatima, and she gets nothing? Yes, she gets nothing. However, Islam allows us to bequests up to 1/3 to non-heirs. That 1/3 that we're allowed to give, you cannot give it to someone who's already inheriting. You can only give it to people who cannot inherit.
If she converts to Islam on his deathbed, does she then automatically can just jump in there and?
That would be very stupid to do, honestly. Because as a wife with children, she'd only get 1/8. But as a non-Muslim, she get 1/3.
What if he wants to give that third to a messenger?
You feel me? So if she using this, she take that 1/3 and then she say her shahada.
But if he doesn't write her in 1/3, and she.
If she's not using this, then I don't know, huh?
If he doesn't write her in that 1/3.
I mean, she gotta know what's in there. I don't know. Does she know what's in there?
Well,
If she doesn't,
technically, can she just accept Islam on his deathbed and automatically inherit?
you mean if he left for nothing?
Yeah, if he didn't write her in his 1/3.
Oh yeah, yeah, he
So
can, yeah.
even in his last second before he dies, he could just accept Islam and automatically.
And get a piece. Yeah, if he cut her out, if she know that. But I think I would think a husband that's cutting his wife out, I don't think she knows that until he's gone. Because I would doubt that she'd be there by his deathbed.
If you prepared his will, I guess, ahead of time.
And let her know you're not getting nothing?
Well, she probably saw the will.
How? Especially when you know that she ain't getting none. How you let her see that? That don't sound right. So the brother's not thinking.
But then after he's gone, that's his will prevail, right?
Of course.
And so it doesn't matter whether she converts or
No, in the sense of if she converted, he could have based his will off of one thing, and then she converted. It would be the responsibility on those not to take more than what Allah has ordained. So they can't go, hey, sorry. The dad already made the division. I don't want to lose any more money. You should have took your shahada earlier. No, but you know better. And she became Muslim now, before he died. So now that changes everything.
So it becomes the heir's responsibility.
It would be, or else they'd be taking money they're not entitled to. And they'd just be taking fire.
The will has to be according to the Sharia.
And it needs to be according to the Sharia. And I think that's what the will say. This is how I want it defined according to the Sharia. So the key word there is it's according to the Sharia. If something changes, then that would automatically change the whole standing of the will. If you could prove that this will is not according to the Sharia anymore because it didn't take into account that I would accept Islam the day before he died and be moved and become Muslim. But if the children want to be like, sorry, of course they could get away with it. It's already the will is done. But they could get away with it until they stand in front of Allah. Then they gotta pay, and everybody has to pay. So we could only run for so long.
Just one more question. In a situation where
Hold on 1 second. Yes, I see it. Hey, listen, I'm in the middle of the lecture. Okay, I love you too. So I'm in the middle of the lecture. What's up? I don't know. You're holding me up though. All right, sorry. Yes, that's my daughter. I wouldn't talk like that to my mom.
in a situation where a non-Muslim converts to Islam and he only has one other relative that's Muslim, and he's one of the fixed heirs, let's say, does that fixed heir then get everything, or they just only still get whatever their portion was designated?
So you're saying a person passes away
And he only has one Muslim relative.
and he has one Muslim relative
Who's part of the fixed heirs.
who's already a fixed heir.
Would they
Technically, what's left over should go to the nearest male relative. But if there are no nearest male relative,
get Muslim relative?
nearest Muslim male relative, then that person would be able to inherit all of it, but that would have to be explicitly written and stated. Because the other option is that it goes to people who do not inherit, or that person gives it away in charity. There would be no harm in that person leaving it all to the only Muslim relative they have.
Yeah, okay. So then I guess going back to that earlier example where the wife converts on his deathbed, if only one of his 5 sons converted, then he just trumps the rest of the family.
Who, the son?
Yeah. If a dad who converts to Islam dies and he
Yeah.
had no Muslim like children or anything.
Uh-huh.
He has like 10 kids,
Yeah.
and one son decides, let me just convert.
Yeah,
now.
he'd get it all.
He just takes
He
it.
win big. I know, it would suck. You know what I'm saying? Like, imagine when I was studying this, I was like, yo, imagine if like, I don't know, you know, who's running Berkshire Hathaway? What's his name?
Warren Buffett.
Warren Buffett. Like, he passed away, and it's like, yo, you're his son. I'd be like, damn, you couldn't tell me this before I took this class. We have different religion. I can't inherit from him. How much again? Wait, hold on. Maybe I just like inherit and I don't know, leave Islam, come back and see this again. It sucks. It's hard. But the people of different religion, we don't inherit from each other. Alhamdulillah, it's fair. It goes both ways. You're signaling me. Give me the talk to me.
Is Maghrib?
Yeah, what time is it?
The Zalm is coming in a minute.
Okay, 1 minute. All right, then, inshallah. So we'll stop for the Maghrib, and then I have a few slides left. Depending on the patience of the audience, I could either come back and finish again with the last 20 slides when everyone is awake and like really patient, or we could push through. It's really up to you guys. But I could come back next week Saturday if everyone else is free to finish the last 20 slides with integrity, like explanation in detail, or we could just fly right through this. Well, you guys want to think about it after the salah?
We'll see you at the next topic.
Yes, it is.
If you want to just summarize that.
All right, then I'll just do a summary then, inshallah.